Hello, everybody. This is George, your 6-year-old ketogenic lifestyle coach from Bridgewater in Somerset, England, in the United Kingdom. And tonight we're going to do part 2 of the 7-video series, which I started yesterday with the introduction. Tonight's video is going to be my own personal story from womb to the age of 60. As I've never told it myself before, I've told it to Dave Mack about 5 times. In fact, 5 times. I've told it to various other people over the years. But this is going to be a one-take wonder of 60 years of life in hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes, or 15 to 20 maybe. So, yeah, 60 years old. So I was born on September the 2nd, 1965 in Musgrove Park Hospital in Taunton in Somerset. I was born by C-section as my mother was 41 years old and certainly wasn't expecting me, because my youngest sibling is exactly 10 years to less 1 day older than me. So I was a great surprise late in life, because my mother believed that she was unable to have any more children, as she'd had an accident which had closed her cervix. So I had to be born by C-section, as there was no possibility of a natural birth. And as we know, anybody born by C-section has a poor start in life, or a disadvantaged start in life, on account of the fact that you don't get the natural flora from the natural birth from your mother's body. So I was also a macrosomic baby, and that means a big baby syndrome. Macro just means big in Greek, and somic means a big child, basically. So I was born at 9.5 pounds. So I was fat when I came out of the womb, as basically it is considered that any baby over 8 pounds and 13 ounces is a big baby. Probably came out of the womb addicted to sugar, on account of the fact that it's entirely possible that my mother had gestational diabetes, although we can never prove that. But it was a time when rationing had ended in the 1950s. This was in the mid 60s. My parents were fairly wealthy, certainly upper medium, middle income wealthy. We lived in a big house on a farm, and mum was a big one for the cream cakes and the chocolate and everything else which went with it. And a lot of the sugar frosties and various sweetened breakfast cereals, and porridge with sugar. So, yeah, I had a pretty poor start in life all round. I was very addicted to chocolates. I can still remember the hiding places that mum used to unsuccessfully try and hide the chocolate from me when I was growing up. And when I used to get my pocket money, it was a question of working out how much bang for my buck I could get. I clearly remember that basically I could get more chocolate biscuits, chocolate digestives for my money than I could get Mars bars. So, I used to think in those terms all the time. Hence, I was an obese child all my life, right the way through primary school and then on into senior school. My parents, being wealthy, thought it would be very, very good for me to send me to a public school, a boarding school. And I was guilty, absolutely tried and guilty, and found and basically became the subject of ridicule, because I was younger than most people in my class. Being born on September the 2nd, I was technically the year above where I should have been, and I was a fat late developer. So I was an easy target for bullying. My nickname was Whale, because children are very, very cruel. Yeah, it's just human nature, isn't it? Everybody goes on about how lovable children are. Not so sure. But anyway, so it was a pretty horrible experience. I was quite glad to get out of it at the age of 15. I went back to live at home, and I went to college for 2 years. At the age of 17, I was still very much a fat late developer. So at 168 pounds of no, wrong. Sorry, I was 14 stone, which is basically about 196 pounds, and I was far from fully developed, and I was very round, very fat, which was a bit. It was the wrong time in my life to be that, because obviously as a 17-year-old hormonal boy, you are very concerned about self-image. Now, my brother, who was 10 years older than me, then decided to help me, and he put me on the 5-2 diet. Now, as we know, the 5-2 diet wasn't invented until, I think, 2003 or so, Michael Mosley claimed. But actually, my brother certainly invented it in 1983 for me. So I fasted from Sunday evening at 7 o'clock until Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock. That was a water only fast for the first for Monday, and then I was allowed coffee on the Tuesday, and then a fried breakfast on the Wednesday, followed by an afternoon of sport at college on the Wednesday afternoon, and then I was walking and cycling everywhere anyway. And then on Sunday lunch, run in the afternoon, 4 mile run in the afternoon, and then back to it. Within, I think, a month or 2 months, I'd lost 2 stone, which is 28 pounds. So I got down to 12 stone, or 168 pounds, and that was my body image sorted out. But of course, as we know, the 5-2 diet works temporarily, but as soon as I went back, I started putting on weight again. However, at the age of 19, I did join the army, and I did outrun a bad diet for a while. But by the age of 24, when I went off to the first Gulf War, I had already started to actually show signs of metabolic ill health. Then when I got back from the Gulf War, I was really starting to struggle with even passing basic fitness tests. The weight was piling on, and I was very miserable in the army, so I left. Maybe stupidly, I don't know. But I went to university for 2 years, where I studied continued my studies around Arabic and Islamic studies. Contracted a fairly rushed and stupid marriage. When that ended after 2 years, and I found myself out of money, not her fault, mine. Then I left that and took on a fairly menial job. Was lucky enough to get recruited into the international security game, diplomatic security game, which gave me the incentive I needed to try to outrun a bad diet again. And indeed, I did so on a couple of occasions when I had a mission to complete. One of which actually was I went up to I did a charity trek in the Himalayas to the top of Kalapata at 18,500 feet in the Himalaya. I was raising money for charity, so I spent the summer of 2000 getting very, very fit because I was based over in the Alps at the time, or at the foot of the Alps of the Jura Mountains, and I spent a lot of time in the mountains, and that's a very good way of getting fit, getting lean again. I came back from the Himalaya at 196 pounds, 14 stone again, which I thought was very good with a 36-inch waist. I thought that was excellent, but once again, very rapidly put it back on to went up to about 20 stone. In other words, 280 pounds or thereabouts. Got a very physical job in 2006. I got a job over in Beirut, which was going to be close protection stuff. So I knew that I would have to be very agile. So I managed to get myself once again down to 15 stone, or in other words, 196, maybe 216 pounds, which wasn't bad. Again, about 36-inch waist. And I was able to do that. And then, but again, when I came back from that, it all went horribly wrong again. Got a job in a warehouse in 2013. And got down to 16 stone. So, it's another 14 pounds on top, but that was not bad for me anyway. In the meantime, in between that, having quit the international security game, I did do some work in a local, very high powered industry to Bridgwater. I spent 4 years there, but I'm not very good at fitting into large corporations, and it stressed me out to the point where I had to go off sick with stress and depression for 11 months, during which time obviously I was spent much of my time lying on the end of my bed staring at the walls, and I wasn't really alive, I was just existing. And after about 11 months, I was able to go back to work, but only as a very basic night security guard. And I was really only existing for the next 10 years, I suppose, or even longer than that, because it didn't all come to a head until 2022, when I was basically realizing that I probably didn't have long to live. I was 21 stone, very ill. I still had quite a big mortgage. I was just concerned that my wife shouldn't be left with a large mortgage. So I was desperately trying to get a diagnosis from the doctors based on my Gulf War service, because I thought I was suffering from Gulf War syndrome. They treated me with utter contempt. They really hated the fact that I was they thought I was a malingerer. They said there was nothing wrong with me, and basically the government were trying to shut the door on all of us veterans of the first Gulf War, because they're scared crapless that they're going to have a big payout. So life would become difficult, shall we say, to say the very least. Then on Christmas Day of 2021, my former team leader from that high-powered industry I was telling you about was found dead on his kitchen floor, having put on a lot of weight at the age of 69. An ex-Royal Marine, used to be very, very fit in his youth, but it caught up with him metabolically. So December 21st, 21, he died. And then in January of 2022, another friend of mine who I'd known for a few years, knew him as a very fit young individual. He'd become addicted to those Monster Energy drinks, put on a shed load of weight, was going to work one morning, got to the bottom of the stairs and dropped dead in January of 2022. Basically, the National Health Service kind of got tired of me, so they kind of they gave me a diagnosis on they gave me a blood test on March 1st, 2022, finally. And then they were able to give me a diagnosis, which was type 2 diabetes, morbid obesity, and very high triglycerides. So classic metabolic syndrome, which I'd never heard of at the time. So what they did is the rude doctor, and I will say rude doctor because I could see the contempt in her eyes. She blamed me, obviously, because I was a fatty and not worthy of her consideration. She issued me with a prescription, 2 prescriptions, one for metformin, and I still to this day couldn't tell you whether the other one was insulin or statins. I suspect it was probably statins. This is type 2 diabetes because I was just into the diabetic range, which is 50 in the UK or 6.7% in the US of A. Now, she told me that basically diabetes was chronic and progressive, and that I would have to manage it with these wonderful pharmaceuticals that she just issued the prescription for the rest of my life. I was incredibly lucky because as I left her office, my phone rang, and it actually said that the phone call was from the same medical centre that I was in. So I answered it, so in a state of confusion, and it was a nurse from the other side of the medical centre. She said, "Please come and see me. There's something I wanted to talk to you about." So I went over, and she ushered me into a room and basically sat me down. Her name is Nurse Kathy Moran. I will never forget this nurse because she saved my life. And she said, "Okay, George, you've just seen Dr. So-and-so." We'll just call her Dr. So-and-so because she was a so-and-so. And she said, "I understand you've got type 2 diabetes." And I said, "Yes, I have." And she said, "Right, okay." She said, "Did anybody ask you about what you eat, about nutrition?" I said, "No, absolutely not." So she said, "Right, okay, tell me what you eat." So I said, "Well, mate, normally," I said, "I eat all the healthy stuff." I said, "Pasta, bread, pizza, noodles, rice. Oh, I love me chili con carne. I love me spaghetti bolognese. I love me triple decker sandwiches, ham sandwiches, egg sandwiches." And she said, "Yeah, what about snacks?" I said, "Oh, I eat hula hoops, I eat crisps." "Okay," she said. Yeah. So yeah, she said. I said, "I don't eat any sugar." I said, "I don't eat cakes. I don't eat chocolate. So I don't eat sugar. So how can I have diabetes?" She looked at me with pity and kindness actually in her eyes, stared into my eyes and said, "George, all carbohydrates are sugar. All carbs are sugar." And I said, "What, even the savoury ones?" She said, "Yes. All carbs turn to glucose in your bloodstream." And that was the light bulb moment, which saved my life. I suddenly realised that there was something I could do about it. My mind went straight to Professor Roy Taylor of Newcastle University, who knows that type 2 diabetes is not a life sentence. And also went to the Atkins diet because I'd seen a guy called Mark Labette, I think, who is quite famous here in the UK, adopt that. So I knew there was something I could do. So my last words were to Kathy that I actually physically have ever spoken to her as I left her office. "We can do this." So I went home. I had a place to start, which was the Professor Roy Taylor, because a pair of celebrity chefs called the Hairy Bikers here in the UK had featured him. They said that you could reverse type 2 diabetes using protein shakes on a calorie basis of 800 calories a day. But what they were doing was that they were doing a maintenance cooking program. So they were cooking low carb to maintain the gains. So I knew that there was this low calorie approach and a low carb approach. So as I did the research and I discovered the cut out the low calorie initial approach and just go straight low carb. So anyway, I picked up the prescriptions tore them up, threw them in the bin because I knew that I could do this for myself. So I did the research. And I went through my main one was I think a company called Healthline, which you'll find on the interweb. But I was very lucky to be working with a guy called Max Branford at the time in construction. Now Max is a bulldozer driver, and he was giving me a lift to work, and I told him what was going on. He said, "Oh, have you ever heard of the ketogenic diet?" I said, "No, it's totally new to me." He said, "Oh yeah, basically what you do is you cut your carbohydrates down to fewer than 50 grams per day." Well, how do you do that? He said, "Well, you basically go and look up what constitutes a gram of carbohydrate." He said, "Now, for example, he said my mum was a type 2 diabetic, but she was addicted to grapes. So what she did was replace her grapes with cherry tomatoes, which are low carb, and that actually took her out of type 2 diabetes." So it just showed you how easy it was if you understood things. I also had that day, I think, I had a tin of oxtail soup with me. One of those, it wasn't particularly brand name, but he looked on it and he said, "Okay then, Jules, this has got 28 grams of carbohydrates in it. This is over half of your allowance of carbohydrates for the day." So I was then able to, he taught me how to read labels. So working with Max, compared to being taught by a doctor, he taught me about the ketogenic diet. He taught me how to learn about carbohydrates. So what does this tell us? I know what it tells me, that basically Max is better educated as a bulldozer driver and better able to help people cure themselves than some moron of a doctor in the National Health Service. And yeah, if that sounds harsh, believe me, the contempt that they showed me is now returned with 100% interest. And I will stand by those words because it was just absolutely horrible the way I was treated by the doctors. Thank God for that nurse. Thank God for Kathy Moran. I was able eventually to contact her via her new surgery because she had left that surgery. Her new surgery is about 15 miles from me. But I sent a message via the practice manager when I successfully had achieved what Kathy had suggested. And the practice manager acknowledged it, said it was wonderful to hear such good feedback, and she would pass on the message. So I know that Kathy got my thanks, which is good. So anyway, so I went away, and for 5 months I went low carb keto, studied it. We're still making horrendous mistakes. We're still thinking in terms of calories instead of hormones. I was still thinking that fruit was good for you. I still thought that fiber was necessary, but I did cut out all the wheat products, all the anything which came from flour, and I did cut out all the starchy vegetables like beetroot, any root vegetables, for example. But I couldn't see any problem with cruciferous vegetables, or to a certain extent some citrus fruit. I still believe that fruit and vegetables were good for you. I didn't know about fiber at the time, so I had a great success on the ketogenic lifestyle. I actually lost 56 pounds of weight. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to reach behind me. I'm actually going to grab the chart so that I've got something to refer to, because that's going to make a lot more sense to everybody and it will make a lot more sense to me. So on the 1st of the 3rd, 2022, the 1st of March 2022, I weighed in at 293 pounds. We'll work in pounds for the sake of our American friends. By the 21st of that month, once I realised that low carb was the approach, I dropped from 293 to 278 pounds. So in 3 weeks, I lost 15 pounds of weight, which is quite remarkable, really, when you think about it. By the 4th of April, I dropped a further 8 pounds to 270. And then I've recorded my weigh-ins since then on the 1st of the month. So on the 1st of May, 264. 1st of June, 253. 2nd of July, 246. Now, at that point, I felt I basically dropped sufficient weight, which was 46 pounds, to actually go and get a second opinion on the way my bloods were going. So at the end of July, I booked myself in for another blood test, and I went and got it on the 4th of August. I was told that they would receive a routine telephone call at 2 p.m. on August the 22nd to give me my results. So I went away fairly happy and carried on with what I was doing. On August the 9th, I got a urgent phone call from Sandra, who is the head diabetes nurse at my clinic, and she said, "George, I need to talk to you urgently." Of course, by this point, I didn't really fully understand what was going on. So I was a bit concerned that I might have made a mistake and that things might have gone wrong. The thought of cholesterol did cross my mind. But she said, I said, do I need to be worried about this, Sandra? She said, no. She said, George, quite the opposite. She said, I need to know what you have done. She said, you have reversed type 2 diabetes in 5 months. She said, I've never known the like of it. Never in my career have I known the like of it. She said, what have you done? So I told her about the low carb approach, and that I cut out all the candy, the chocolate, the crisps, the cakes, the seasoned peas, a piece of the pasta, pastry, potatoes, and she was very impressed. So she said, I said, what about my cholesterol? She said, oh yeah, well your cholesterol's gone up. She said, but we're not worried about that because your triglycerides dropped so far and your HDL has gone up that we're ignoring the LDL. So fairly forward thinking, which is nice. They didn't offer me a statin. Excuse me. So yeah, I was happy. And I said, what about the call from Richard, who is my newly nominated diabetes nurse on the 22nd of August? I said, oh no, I've dealt with this now, so Richard won't be phoning you. Anyway, on the 22nd of August, I got a further phone call. It was 2 p.m. on August the 22nd, and I said, oh, hello, Richard. He said, George, he said, I'm not supposed to be phoning you because Sandra had already dealt with it. He said, I'm doing this off grid. He said, but I just need to know for myself. What did you do? And I had to explain the low carb approach to him again. He said, that's fascinating. He said, I wish I could get you in here to talk about low carb. He said, but I can't because it goes against everything that we've ever been taught. So again, that was an admission by somebody in the NHS who was basically dependent on these people for his, to pay for his monthly bills, saying that basically he is under the jackboot and cannot tell the truth. It kind of proves it, doesn't it? And we're going to see that time and time again in this story. Well, not time and time again, but we're going to see it more than once. So that was August of 2022. By the 1st of November of the 1st of October 22, I dropped down to 219 pounds. So basically, that was 74 pounds gone since I started. In 7 months or thereabouts, or 8 months, yeah. And so it goes on, and I carried on. I sort of basically dropped down to, and that was 200. I hovered around there for a while, and then dropped down to 210 pounds by the 1st of June of 23. Carried on losing, and by the 1st of January of 24, I was down to 193 pounds. The January 94 is an interesting one because I had my next set of bloods, because I booked one for October of 23, but they cancelled me at the very last minute, having taken a day off. But of course, it's your fault for just being a nuisance to them. And they phoned me about half an hour and said, oh, we can't do it today. And I said, well, hang on a second, I've taken a day off. Oh, yeah, well, we're too busy. I'll just go to work anyway. But I said, well, my work's about 40 miles away and it starts at 5 in the morning. I can't do this now. Oh, sorry about it. No, they didn't say sorry. Oh, well, yeah, we'll just go to work anyway and rebook. So I rebooked for January. Yeah, typical rude NHS, really rude NHS. And so I went back in January, and the creature that dealt with me, this nurse, was probably one of the rudest people I've ever met in my life. She was magnificently rude. If you thought Basil Fawlty was rude, you should have seen her. I won't name her. But the first thing she said, well, why have you left it so long? Why have you left it until now before you came? I said, hang on a second, I didn't. I booked in just over a year after my last test, which is what I'm supposed to do. She said, well, why didn't you turn up? I said, the reason I didn't turn up is you cancelled me at the last minute. I said, there was no apology. You cancelled me at the last minute. She said, oh, we were obviously too busy then. Again, no apology, no explanation, nothing. So she said, right, let's go on it. So I said, well, can we just review my previous results? No, I'm too busy for that. I said, no, I think we need to, because the two oh, you said, yeah, she lost a lot of weight. She said, oh, and you've reversed type 2, but no, congratulations. No sort of, oh, how did you do it or anything? So I'll get on the scale. So this was like in January of 24. And it was, I weighed in 193 pounds versus August when I weighed in at 237. Oh, yeah, you've lost a bit more weight. No comment again, though. God, this woman was rude. Probably an ass, but it didn't just stop there, because basically at the end of it, I said, when do I get my results? How are you going to notify me of my results? Oh, we don't. Only if there's something wrong will we notify you. You'll have to go onto the NHS app. I said, I haven't got the NHS. Well, you'll have to download it then, won't you? I said, well, how do I do that? Can you tell me? She said, I don't know how to do it. She said, I had to get my sister to do it for me. I said, well, how do you expect me to do it then? She said, well, go and see reception. Get them to do it. It was basically slope your shoulders, make it separate, make it somebody else's problem. Okay. Anyway, so I didn't thank her. I just walked out of that office. She didn't deserve my thanks. I say one of the rudest people I've ever met in my life. So I went to the reception. I said, "Oh, I've been told to come and get my get you to give me the NHS app to tell me how to do it." She said, "Oh God," rolled her eyes. Clearly, she was far too busy to be bothered with a customer, because that's what we are in the UK. We are customers because we pay through our taxes. So he said, right, let me see your photograph ID. I said, I didn't bring any. He said, well, why not? I said, well, I came in here on the strength of my date of birth and my address. You processed me and sent me in to get a needle shoved in my arm. I said, really? She said, oh, I have to have your photographic ID. I said, this isn't going to happen, is it? I said, I can see you're clearly too busy. I said, so thank you so much for your time and politeness. And I said, and I just walked out. Don't think I ever set foot in that surgery again, thankfully, because I was able to, as with my veteran status, to change to a much better surgery, more of which later. Anyway, so my next, I basically we're January 24. We're going to go on to my next blood test of September 24, when life had changed and I'd managed to get into a veteran-friendly surgery across the other side of town, which I'm prepared to name. It's called the East Key Medical Centre in Bridgewater in Somerset. And I went for my next set of bloods. I was expecting a war. I was expecting rudeness. I met this wonderful young lady, healthcare assistant called Vicky. She looked at my results and was amazed, congratulated me. She said, how do you do it? I said, I'm low carb. I said, I eat only meat. I do not eat any fruit or vegetables. I was expecting an immediate pushback from her because she was young. She said, oh, it's fantastic, she said, because my son's a type 1 diabetic. So we are very low carb in our household, ketogenic even. I was incredibly refreshed by her attitude. It was absolutely amazing compared to that horrible woman that I dealt with back in January. So we had a good laugh, we had a good talk about it, and she was found out I didn't have any neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, because she tickled my feet and had to get out of the way because the reaction was reflex reaction that like nearly took her head off and my foot would flew up in the air. And then she tested my pulse with a stethoscope and an electronic basically pulse stethoscope, and she had to whip. So that's the fullest pulse I've ever heard on anybody, diabetic or not. So yeah, I was fine. I got called forward on October the 9th for my results. September 26th, October the 9th. Nurse Abby dealt with me, and she told me that I was the most spectacular success story when it came to reversing type 2 diabetes that she'd ever known in her life. She's only a young diabetes nurse, so obviously there's an awful lot of people out there like me who she hasn't come across. She wished that I could go and talk to her failing type 2 diabetes patients about carnivore and about the zero carb diet or elimination diet. I pointed out to her that I couldn't do that because she would get struck off. She reluctantly admitted, yes, I was right. But this is a key point. She said that she believed that in 10 years' time, the narrative, the conversation, should I use narrative or conversation, will have changed in our favour. So as long as we've got people like Kath Moran and Nurse Abby out there and healthcare assistant Vicky, we have half a chance. As long as we've got morons as doctors, we have no chance. But there is a groundswell, a grassroots movement of which the diabetes nurses appear to be informed members, educated members. So there is hope out there for us. So that was then, and now we are basically a year on. I've continued to make my progression. What's happened in that year is that back in March, I got involved with the Dr. Kilts over in America when a young lady from Britain was on there. And in chat, she noticed me, and I thought she was somebody I'd like to talk to. So I went through a mutual friend and got her number. We basically became friends. I did an interview on her channel, And by June, I kind of made a decision that I was going to commit myself to fully 100% carnivore. So I took a step back from the horse racing industry, which had been my main passion from then. The young lady in question, in fact, I can name her, it's Stephanie Taylor of Happy Sexy Health. And I think it was on June the 6th that I said, right, then, Steph, I am going to sign up for the Kilts Health coaching course over in America. It's only $400 for 3 months. I think it's really good value. And she said, that's really absolutely right, George. So she and her sister, Nikki, also signed up for it. So we were the only 3 Brits on the first coaching course. At the same time, I asked her to join me and Carl Day of the Primal Lifestyle, plus a couple of other people, on the Great British Meetup committee for the Great British Meetup of August 2nd of last year. So Steph got further in, and then I invited her as the very first guest on the very first episode of what is now Carnivore Sunday School with John Laspina, the carnivore teacher. And within about 3 weeks, she'd virtually taken the show over. John is now officially the headmaster. I am the deputy head, history teacher and other teacher. And Steph is the school secretary. But no question, she is the organizer, the boss, basically. So it's been a wonderful experience sharing that with her. So yeah, basically by teaming up with Steph, I was able to we were able to really sort of make a difference in the carnivore world. I'm going to say the way I develop community for the community program, because I'm now hit over half an hour. But just to give you a final sort of roundup of where I am, I started on the 1st of March at 293 pounds. On the 1st of July this year, I saw 168 pounds. On the 1st of November, I've put on a further 8 pounds again because we're heading towards winter, and I suspect I've been just eating more than I have been in the past. But I'm keeping an eye on that. So I weighed 176 pounds on the 1st of November, which I'm quite happy with because it's basically my 18-year-old weight. And just to give you a bit of a sense of perspective, if I hold up my business card, that was me in 2019. So it would have been very similar to me in 2022 when this started. As you can tell, I'm barrel shaped. I've got several chins, belly hanging over the waist belt, a waist of 44 inches. If I do this, then you'll give you the contrast. That was me in Wyoming over in America back in August of this year with a 34-inch waist. So I've lost 10 inches off my waist. In fact, I can squeeze into a 32. And I weighed, as I say, on that occasion, I was about 172 pounds there. So that is the contrast of me having adopted the ketogenic carnivore lifestyle. So if anybody doubts the effectiveness of it, I find it works, and that is the honest to God's truth. So anybody who's watching this who doesn't know me, anybody who's thinking about adopting the ketogenic diet and would like my services as a coach, then that's my story. And any of you who know me well, well, that is my full story as I told it. I've now reached over half an hour, so I'm going to say thank you very much for sticking with me if you have done this far. And I'm going to sign off, and I'll say bye for now.